If someone had told me morning would bring coffee, not regret, I would have doubted it. Some days I swear I've faded from sight. At 57, alone among dust-coated archives and forgotten artifacts, I wonder if anyone would notice if I slipped into the stacks and never came back. I'm Eleanor Hart, and for 30 years I've arranged other people's histories while somehow misplacing my own. Morning light slanted through the tall windows of the Durham Museum, laying long shadows across my desk. I was cataloging a new shipment of 19th-century textiles when the whole building shuddered, engines roaring outside, followed by a crack that sounded like a small explosion. "What the hell was that?" I muttered, rushing to the window. A blonde woman in leather gear stood beside a smoking motorcycle, yanking off her helmet and cursing in fluent Spanish. Even from 3 floors up, I could see her hands shaking with pure rage. She kicked the bike's tire, then immediately regretted it, hopping on one foot. Something about her raw emotion struck me. Most people hide their feelings behind polite masks, but this woman wore hers like battle armor. Later that afternoon, I forced myself to leave the museum's comfortable isolation. The annual Spring Cultural Festival filled downtown with music and laughter. I usually avoided crowds, but Mrs. Leong had been pestering me about her pottery booth for weeks. The festival buzzed with families and couples enjoying the warm April air. I wandered past food trucks and craft vendors, feeling increasingly out of place among all the joy and connection. Then I saw her again. The motorcycle woman stood at Mrs. Liang's pottery display, holding a delicate blue vase. Up close, she was even more striking. Blonde hair caught the sunlight, and her blue eyes held depths I couldn't quite read. She'd changed from leather into jeans and a simple white t-shirt that somehow made her look both vulnerable and dangerous. "Excuse me," I said, reaching for the same piece. Our fingers brushed as we both touched the ceramic surface. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds, but something shifted in the air between us. "Sorry, I was just admiring the craftsmanship," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "The glaze work is exceptional," I replied, trying to sound professional instead of flustered. "Mrs. Leong uses traditional techniques that date back centuries." She studied my face with surprising intensity. "You know about pottery?" "I know about preservation, old things, beautiful things that deserve to be protected." A slow smile spread across her lips. "I'm Valentina Cruz, and you clearly know more than pottery." "Eleanor Hart. I work at the museum. The one who catalogs forgotten treasures." How did she know that? "Something like that." Valentina sat down the vase and stepped closer. "Want to grab coffee?" I have questions about preserving things that matter. Every instinct told me to politely decline and retreat to my safe, predictable world. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Yes." As we walked toward the coffee cart, I caught her scent. Motor oil and something floral. An impossible combination that somehow worked perfectly. She moved with confident grace like someone accustomed to taking risks and winning. "So, what brings a museum archivist to a street festival?" Valentina asked, ordering 2 espressos without asking my preference. "Mrs. Liang's pottery and curiosity, I suppose." I accepted the tiny cup, our fingers brushing again. "What brings a motorcycle rider to ceramics?" "Beauty in unexpected places." She sipped her espresso, never breaking eye contact. "Plus, I needed to slow down after this morning's disaster." The smoking bike. Sponsor meeting gone wrong. Sometimes you have to crash before you can rebuild. There was something profound in her words, though I couldn't quite grasp what. We found an empty bench near the fountain, sitting close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Tell me about forgotten treasures," Valentina said. So, I did. I told her about medieval tapestries and Revolutionary War letters, about the thrill of discovering someone's carefully preserved love story in a dusty box. She listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions that revealed an unexpected depth. "You make history sound alive," she said when I paused. "It is alive. Every artifact represents someone who loved, fought, dreamed just like us." Valentina leaned closer. "What do you dream about, Eleanor?" The question caught me off guard. When had anyone last asked me that? I used to dream about traveling, seeing the places where these artifacts originated. But that was long ago. Why long ago? Life gets complicated. Safe becomes easier than sorry. Safe is overrated. Valentina's hand moved to cover mine on the bench. "What if sorry leads somewhere amazing?" Before I could answer, she leaned in and kissed me soft, questioning like she was asking permission. And I didn't know I wanted to give. The world around us faded until there was nothing but the taste of espresso on her lips and the gentle pressure of her mouth against mine. When we broke apart, my heart was racing like I'd run a marathon. I should go, I whispered. Though I made no move to leave. Should you? Valentina's thumb traced across my knuckles. Or do you want to see what happens next? 3 days after that kiss, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Medieval manuscripts blurred together, and I kept catching myself replaying the moment Valentina's lips touched mine. I was acting like a teenager. And at 57, that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Then she walked into my museum. I need your help with something, Valentina announced, striding past the security desk like she owned the place. She wore dark jeans and a fitted black jacket that made her look like trouble I wanted to invite in. How did you find me, Google? Plus, there's only one Eleanor Hart who works with historical artifacts in Durham. She grinned. I have a project. I led her to my office, acutely aware of how her presence transformed the sterile space. She examined everything with curious eyes, touching nothing but somehow claiming the room. My racing team wants to create a heritage display, she explained. Photos, memorabilia from when women first started competing professionally. I need someone who understands preservation. That's actually fascinating. Most people don't realize how early women entered motorsports. Exactly. Valentina leaned against my desk. I was hoping you'd help me research it. The project gave me an excuse to see her again, though I suspected she knew that. We spent the afternoon digging through archives, her enthusiasm infectious as we uncovered forgotten stories of pioneering female racers. Look at this, I said, showing her a 1920s photograph. Lillian Harrow, one of the first women to compete internationally. Valentina studied the image intently. She looks fearless. She had to be. The world wasn't ready for women who refused to stay safely on the sidelines. Some things never change. Valentina's voice carried an edge I couldn't interpret. Society still punishes women who take risks. That evening, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I searched for Valentina online. The videos were mesmerizing. She moved around racing circuits with fluid precision, handling machines that could kill her without hesitation. In interviews, she was articulate and confident, discussing technical specifications with the kind of passion I reserved for medieval art. But it was the crashes that held me captive. Footage of her walking away from twisted metal, brushing off concerned officials with casual waves. She lived on the edge of disaster and seemed to thrive there. How could someone so reckless kiss me with such gentle care? The next morning, she texted me, "Coffee? I have questions about motorcycle maintenance in the 1940s. We met at a small cafe near campus. Valentina arrived wearing her racing leathers, fresh from morning practice. The smell of motor oil and excitement clung to her skin. Research going well? I asked. Better than expected. She ordered black coffee and a chocolate croissant. I keep thinking about what you said yesterday. Which part? About women who refuse to stay safely on the sidelines. Valentina stirred her coffee slowly. Is that what you did? Stay safe? The question stung because it was accurate. I chose stability over uncertainty. But what did you give up for that stability? I couldn't answer immediately. The truth was too complicated, too painful to examine in daylight with this magnetic woman watching me intently. Adventure, I suppose. Spontaneity, the possibility of spectacular failure or spectacular success. Valentina reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. What if failure isn't the worst thing that could happen? What is never trying at all? Her words lingered as we walked back toward the museum. At the entrance, Valentina stopped and turned to face me. I want to show you something, she said. My world. Would you come to my garage tonight? Every rational part of me screamed to decline. This woman represented everything I'd spent decades avoiding. Chaos, unpredictability, the kind of intense attraction that could derail a carefully constructed life. Okay, I heard myself say. Valentina's smile was radiant. 7 o'clock, I'll text you the address. She kissed my cheek before walking away, leaving me standing on the museum steps, wondering what the hell I was doing. That afternoon, I couldn't focus on work. I kept picturing her garage, what it would be like to step into her world instead of hiding in mine. By 6:30, I'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a blue sweater that made my eyes look brighter. I hadn't dressed up for anyone in years, but something about Valentina made me want to try. Her garage occupied a converted warehouse in the industrial district. From the street it looked rough, but when she rolled up the door, I actually gasped. Inside was pristine, motorcycles and every stage of restoration lined the walls, chrome gleaming beneath professional lights. Tools hung in precise order, and low classical music floated from hidden speakers. "Welcome to my sanctuary," Valentina said, watching my face. "It's gorgeous, and not at all what I expected." "What were you expecting?" "Chaos. Noise. Testosterone-fueled mayhem." She laughed. "That's the track. This is where I think." She led me through the projects, explaining each one with obvious devotion. Her hands moved with effortless accuracy, and I caught myself mesmerized by her competence. "Want to try?" she asked, offering a wrench. "I'll break something. Nothing here can't be fixed." She stepped in behind me, guiding my hands. "Feel the resistance. Don't force it." Her breath warmed the back of my neck. The simple task hummed with awareness, her body aligned with mine. "There," she murmured when the bolt finally loosened. "Natural talent." I turned in her arms, bold without warning. "Is that what this is?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I want to find out." When she kissed me this time, there was nothing tentative about it. Her mouth was sure, and I discovered I liked being met with certainty. My fingers slid into her hair as she pressed me against the workbench, and for the first time in years, I felt vividly alive. The next 2 weeks changed everything. Valentina began dropping by the museum, always with legitimate research questions that gave us hours together. She arrived with coffee and pastries, and my sterile office started to feel almost like home. "Tell me about this," she said one afternoon, tapping a photograph of a 1932 racing team. "The Brooklands Circuit," I said, savoring how she leaned in to listen. "Britain's first purpose-built racing track. These women look like warriors." They were. Racing was their rebellion against everything society said they couldn't do. Valentina's hand found mine across the desk. "What's your rebellion, Eleanor?" "I don't have one. Everyone has one. Yours is just quieter." Maybe she was right. Maybe letting her into my carefully ordered world was the most rebellious thing I'd done in decades. That evening, I surprised myself by calling her instead of going straight home. "Want to see something special?" I asked. "Always." I met her at the museum after hours, using my key card to let us into the restricted archives. The basement storage area held our most precious and fragile pieces, items too delicate for regular display. "This is incredible," Valentina whispered, following me through climate-controlled corridors lined with archival boxes. I led her to my favorite section where medieval illuminated manuscripts rested in custom-built cases. Under soft lighting, the gold leaf and vibrant pigment seemed to glow with their own inner fire. "This prayer book is 800 years old," I said, carefully opening one case. "Hand-copied by monks who spent their entire lives creating beauty." Valentina leaned over the glass, studying the intricate artwork. "They poured their souls into every stroke." "Exactly. That's what makes it precious. Someone cared enough to make it perfect like you do with everything you preserve." The observation caught me off guard. "I just maintain what others created." "No." Valentina turned to face me. "You give these treasures life. You make people care about things they never knew existed." Standing there in the dim light, surrounded by centuries of human creativity, something shifted between us. The polite distance I'd maintained began crumbling. "Why do you do that?" I asked. "What?" "See things in me that I don't see myself." "Because you're worth seeing." Valentina stepped closer. "You fascinate me, Eleanor." "I'm not fascinating. I'm predictable and safe and ordinary. You're passionate and intelligent and beautiful, and you have no idea how extraordinary you are." The words hung in the air between us. I wanted to argue to deflect the compliment with self-deprecation, but the way she looked at me made protest impossible. "I scare myself when I'm with you," I admitted. "Good scared or bad scared?" "Both." Valentina reached up to touch my face, her fingers tracing the lines time had carved around my eyes. "I scare myself, too." When she kissed me this time, it was different. Slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility. I kissed her back with a hunger I didn't know I possessed. My hands gripping her jacket as if she might disappear. We spent the rest of the evening talking in whispers, sharing stories we'd never told anyone. She told me about the loneliness of being the only woman on most racing circuits, how she'd learned to armor herself with confidence because vulnerability was perceived as weakness. I told her about choosing safety over dreams. About the lovers I'd pushed away because intimacy felt too dangerous. About the nights I lay awake wondering if I'd traded my life for security. "It's not too late," she said softly. "For what?" "For everything." By the time we left the museum, dawn was painting the sky pale pink. Valentina walked me to my car, neither of us wanting the night to end. "Dinner tomorrow?" she asked. "I'd like that. My place? I'll cook." The promise in her voice made my stomach flutter like a teenager's. Over the next few days, we fell into an easy rhythm. She'd text me good morning, and I'd find myself smiling at my phone like a fool. We'd meet for lunch, take evening walks, talk until midnight about everything and nothing. She was teaching me to live again, though I don't think she realized it. The night she cooked dinner, I arrived at her apartment nervous and excited. She lived in a converted loft with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "Wine," she offered, pouring 2 glasses of red. "Trying to get me drunk," I teased. "Trying to get you relaxed." The dinner was perfect. Pasta with fresh herbs from her windowsill garden, crusty bread, and conversation that flowed like the wine. But it was the way she listened that undid me completely. She hung on every word, asked thoughtful questions, made me feel like the most interesting person in the world. After dinner, she put on music and pulled me into her arms. "Dance with me," she said. "I don't really dance." "Neither do I." "Well, figure it out together." We swayed to old jazz standards, her hands warm against my back. She hummed along to the melodies, her breath tickling my ear. The domestic intimacy felt more daring than any passionate embrace. "Eleanor," she whispered. "Yes, I'm falling for you hard." The admission should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming home. "I'm falling too," I whispered back. She pulled away just enough to look at me, her blue eyes searching my face. "What do we do about that?" "I have no idea." "Want to find out together?" This time when she kissed me, I didn't hold back. I kissed her with 30 years of pent-up longing. With the desperation of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly wanted. We made love that night with a tenderness that surprised us both. She touched me like I was made of spun glass, whispering my name like a prayer. I discovered that my body still knew how to sing, even after years of silence. Afterward, lying tangled in her sheets, I felt more alive than I had in decades. "No regrets?" she asked softly. "None?" I assured her and meant it completely. The call came at 2 o'clock in the morning. My phone screamed from the nightstand, jolting me from dreams of warm skin and whispered promises. I fumbled for it in the darkness, heart racing. "Eleanor," the voice was professional, clinical. "This is Mercy General Hospital. Valentina Cruz listed you as her emergency contact." The world tilted sideways. "What happened?" "Racing accident." "She's stable, but you should come." I threw on clothes without looking, my hands shaking so badly I could barely button my shirt. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of red lights and mounting panic. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and despair. A tired nurse led me through sterile corridors to Valentina's room, warning me about the tubes and machines I'd find. Nothing prepared me for seeing her so still. Valentina lay unconscious, her face pale against white pillows. Bandages covered her left arm, and monitors beeped steadily beside the bed. The vibrant woman who turned my world upside down looked fragile as ancient parchment. "The concussion isn't severe," a doctor explained. "Broken ribs, fractured wrist." She was lucky. Lucky. I stared at tubes delivering fluids into her arm, at the oxygen mask covering her beautiful mouth, and wondered how anyone could call this lucky. I pulled a chair beside her bed and took her uninjured hand in mine. Her fingers were cold, still smudged with motor oil under the nails. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm right here." Hours passed. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications. I stayed planted beside her bed, afraid that leaving might somehow break the thin thread keeping her tethered to consciousness. When she finally opened her eyes, the relief nearly knocked me over. "Ellie." Her voice was confused. "Don't try to talk. You're in the hospital." "The race." She tried to sit up, grimacing at the pain. "Forget the damn race. You could have been killed." Tears I'd been holding back for hours spilled down my cheeks. The thought of losing her before I'd really found her was unbearable. Hey. Valentina squeezed my hand weakly. I'm okay. You are not okay. You're broken and bruised. And I was so scared. Scared of what? That I'd never get to tell you I love you. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Valentina's eyes widened, then softened. Say that again. I love you completely, ridiculously. I love you so much, it terrifies me. A slow smile spread across her battered face. I love you, too. The next few days smeared into one soft blur. I took leave from the museum and moved into Valentina's orbit, helping her manage life with only one good arm. By the third morning she huffed, I can butter my own toast. Humor me. I need to feel useful. You are, she said. You're keeping me sane. But I could see the frustration simmering. Valentina lived on speed and self-reliance. Being forced into stillness was its own punishment. When can I get back on the bike? She asked at her follow-up. Minimum 6 weeks, the doctor said. Probably 8. I watched her face fold in on itself. Racing wasn't just work, it was who she was. That evening she stood at the window, staring down at the city lights. She'd been quiet since the appointment, sunken thoughts she wouldn't voice. I sat beside her. Talk to me. What if I can't do it anymore? Race? Of course you can. It's temporary. No, she turned, eyes stripped bare. What if I can't handle the fear? What if seeing that truck coming changed something fundamental? Then I understood, it wasn't her body she doubted. It was her nerve. You're the bravest person I know, I said. I wasn't brave when I called your name instead of keeping my head in the race. I was distracted, thinking about you, not the track. Guilt hit like a punch. You're saying I caused this? I'm saying love makes you vulnerable, and in my world, vulnerability gets you killed. The words hung there like a gauntlet. Was she asking me to choose between us and her safety? So what are we saying? I asked carefully. I don't know. I just know I can't lose you, and I can't lose racing. I'm scared I can't have both. I slid closer, threading my fingers through her good hand. What if you don't have to choose? How? What if love makes you stronger, not weaker? What if having something to come home to makes the risk worth taking? She searched my face. You really believe that? I do. Loving you has made me braver than I've ever been. Maybe it can do the same for you. That night we were tender and fierce all at once. I traced the edges of her bandages with careful fingers, kissed every bruise, every scrape. She touched me like she was memorizing, as if I might vanish if she let go. Don't leave me, she breathed against my throat. Never, I promised. I'm not going anywhere. Even as I said it, the doubt pricked. Would love be enough? Her world was risky, volatile. Mine, ordered and safe. Could anything lasting be built across foundations so different? 3 weeks into recovery, the restlessness was spilling over. She'd started physical therapy and, understandably, had grown tired of my hovering. Go back to work, she finally said. I can manage a few hours alone. Are you sure, Ellie? I love you, but you're driving me crazy with the worried glances. She was right. I'd become overprotective to the point of suffocation. The accident had unlocked fears I didn't know I carried. Returning to the museum felt strange after weeks away. My colleagues welcomed me back with questions about mysterious leave, but I deflected with vague answers about family obligations. How could I explain that I'd discovered love at 57, that a woman half my age had crashed into my life and changed everything? That evening, I returned to Valentina's apartment to find her sitting at her kitchen table surrounded by racing magazines and laptop screens showing crash footage. What are you doing? Research. Analyzing what went wrong. I watched her rewind the same crash sequence repeatedly, studying it with clinical detachment that made my stomach clench. Maybe you shouldn't watch that. I have to understand it. If I can't figure out what happened, I'll never trust myself on the track again. There it was. The real fear. Not that she might crash again, but that she might lack the courage to try. Come here, I said gently. She looked up from the screen and I saw the lost expression she'd been hiding behind determined recovery. I don't know who I am if I'm not racing. You're the woman who makes me laugh every day. Who sees beauty in old pottery and asks brilliant questions about medieval manuscripts. Who loves with her whole heart and isn't afraid to show it. That's not enough. It's everything. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her trembling despite her brave words. The accident had shaken more than her body. It had cracked the foundation of her fearless self-image. "We'll figure this out together," I whispered. "Whatever it takes." 2 months after the accident, just as Valentina was cleared to return to racing, her life imploded in a way neither of us saw coming. I was organizing textile displays when Valentina burst into the museum, her face pale with panic. Her hands shook as she approached my desk, and I could see she'd been crying. "They're here," she said breathlessly. "My parents at my apartment." "What's wrong with that?" "They brought him Diego Valverde, the man they want me to marry." The words hit me like cold water. In all our intimate conversations, Valentina had never mentioned any arrangement. She talked about her wealthy family in vague terms, but never this. "I don't understand." Valentina sank into the chair across from my desk. "It's complicated. My father made some bad investments last year. The family business is struggling. Diego's father owns a shipping company and marriage to me would secure a partnership that saves everything. But you're with me. They don't know about you, about us." Her voice cracked. "They flew in from Fort Lauderdale this morning with contracts and wedding planners. They assume I'll just comply like I always have." I stared at her, processing the magnitude of what she was saying. "So tell them no, it's not that simple. If I refuse, my parents lose everything. My father could go to prison for some of the debts he's accumulated trying to save the company." The rational part of me understood family obligation. The part of me that loved her wanted to fight for what we'd built together. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I came here because I needed to see you before I decide anything." We sat in silence for several moments, the weight of impossible choices settling between us. "There might be another way," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" "What if you were already married to someone else?" Valentina's eyes widened. "Ellie, what are you suggesting? Marry me?" "Not for real, just legally. It would solve your parents' problem and give us time to figure out the rest." The words surprised me as much as they did her. I'd never been impulsive, never suggested anything so potentially destructive to my carefully ordered life. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious. We need each other, Valentina. This could work." "It's insane. We've known each other 4 months. Does time matter when you know something is right?" She stood up, pacing behind the chair. "You don't understand what you're offering. My family doesn't just want a marriage. They want a Catholic ceremony with 300 guests and a reception that costs more than most people make in a year. So, we do it quietly. Courthouse wedding. Just us present them with a done deal and then what? We pretend to be married while figuring out if we actually want to be together." The question hung in the air. I realized I was asking her to leap into an unknown future based on feelings that were real but untested by time. "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." Valentina stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "You would do that? Risk everything for someone you've known for months?" "I would do that for you." She was quiet for so long. I thought she might refuse. Then she pulled out her phone. "I need to call Diego and tell him I can't marry him." Her hands shook as she dialed, but not because of the arrangement my parents made. I listened to her explain in rapid Spanish that she was already committed to someone else. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, more definite. When she hung up, she looked at me with something like awe. "They want to meet you immediately. My parents are demanding I bring my mysterious fiancé to dinner tonight." Okay. Just like that. Just like that. "Ellie, they're going to hate you. You're older. You're not Catholic. You're not part of their social circle. And you're a woman. They'll think this is some kind of rebellion, isn't it?" A slow smile spread across Valentina's face. "Maybe it is." That evening, I dressed more carefully than I had for any event in years. Conservative navy blue dress, pearl earrings, low heels. I wanted to look respectable, unthreatening. Valentina picked me up at 7 o'clock, looking elegant in a black dress that made her eyes seem impossibly blue. She was nervous, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel as we drove to the upscale restaurant her parents had chosen. "Last chance to back out," she said as we pulled into the parking lot. "Not happening." The Cruz family occupied a corner table that commanded attention. Valentina's father was silver-haired and distinguished, her mother elegant in the way that money and good breeding create. Diego sat beside them, looking like he'd stepped from a magazine spread. "Mommy, puppy," Valentina said, switching to English for my benefit. "This is Eleanor Hart." The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Valentina's mother forced a smile. "Miss Hart. Valentina tells us you work in a museum." "I'm an archivist at the Durham Museum of History." "How academic." The comment dripped with polite disdain. Valentina's father was more direct. "Valentina, what exactly is going on here?" "Eleanor and I are engaged, Poppy. We're getting married next week." If a restaurant full of people could suddenly go silent, this one did. Diego looked like he'd been slapped. Valentina's mother clutched her pearls literally. "This is ridiculous," her father said. "You can't be serious." "We're completely serious," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I love your daughter very much." "You're old enough to be her mother," Valentina's mother whispered. "Age is just a number when you find the right person," Valentina said firmly, reaching for my hand across the table. The argument that followed was conducted in rapid Spanish, voices rising as accusations flew. I understood enough to know they were questioning everything from my motives to Valentina's sanity. Finally, Diego stood up. "This is humiliating. I'm leaving." After he left, the conversation continued in English, growing more heated by the minute. "You're throwing away your future for what? A face?" Valentina's father demanded. "I'm choosing love over obligation," Valentina replied. "Something you've never understood." "And what about the family business, your responsibilities?" "Find another solution. I'm not merchandise you can trade for financial security." When we finally escaped the restaurant, we sat in Valentina's car in stunned silence. "Well," she said eventually. "That went about as badly as expected. Are you having second thoughts about marrying you?" "No." "About whether my parents will ever forgive me?" "Absolutely. We don't have to go through with this if you're not sure." Valentina turned to look at me in the dim light of the parking lot. "I've never been more sure of anything. The question is, are you ready to marry someone whose family thinks you're corrupting their daughter?" I thought about my quiet, predictable life from 6 months ago. Then I looked at the woman who changed everything. "Let's go get married," I said. The courthouse wedding happened on a rainy Thursday morning. We'd planned it in 3 days, rushing through paperwork and blood tests with the efficiency of people running from something, which I suppose we were. I wore a simple cream dress I'd grabbed the night before. Valentina chose navy, elegant, understated. We looked like two respectable women settling paperwork, not lovers taking the biggest leap of our lives. "You sure about this?" the clerk asked, scanning our forms with mild concern. "Absolutely," we said together, then laughed, nerves clattering under the word. The ceremony took 7 minutes, start to finish. Judge Luis Ortega read the standard vows while rain drummed the hall windows. When he pronounced us married, Valentina kissed me with a tenderness that startled me, given this was supposed to be a performance. "Mrs. Hart," she breathed against my mouth. "Mrs. Cruz Hart," I corrected. The name felt strange on my tongue. At 57, I never expected to share an identity with anyone. We celebrated with champagne at an upscale restaurant, toasting a fake marriage that felt more genuine by the hour. The legal papers in my purse carried a surprising weight. "So, what now?" I asked over dessert. "Now we go home and pretend to be married while we figure out if we actually want to be. Your place or mine?" "Ours," Valentina said simply. "If we're going to sell this, we should probably live together." That evening I packed a suitcase, clothes, toiletries, and left my apartment for an open-ended stay at her loft. The practicalities felt surreal. We were playing house, except the feelings underneath weren't make-believe at all. "Which side of the bed do you want?" she asked as we got ready for our first night as legal spouses. "I usually sleep in the middle." Problem solved. "So do I." Sliding beneath the covers beside her felt both natural and terrifying. The signed bond between us shifted something essential, even if we entered it for practical reasons. "No regrets?" she murmured into the dark. "Ask me again in 6 months." Married routines found their own rhythm. I kept my museum schedule. Valentina eased back into racing, confidence returning in increments after the crash. We shared morning coffee and weeknight dinners, trading stories like any ordinary couple, except nothing about us was ordinary. "Your mail," Valentina said one morning, handing over official envelopes addressed to Mrs. Eleanor William Cruz. Seeing our names spliced together sent a bright, unexpected thrill through me. What began as convenience was being refashioned by domestic intimacy into something deeper. The insurance company wants info on my new spouse, I said. Family policy rates. Tell them I'm dangerously accident-prone but worth the premium hike. Those small jokes punctuated days of learning each other's habits. Valentina sang in the shower and left coffee rings on expensive tables. I alphabetized everything and fell asleep over historical journals. You're adorable when you're annotating medieval texts, she said one evening, watching me work at the kitchen table. You're distracting when you work out shirtless in the living room. Fair point. 3 weeks into married life, physical attraction became impossible to ignore. We'd been careful to maintain boundaries, sleeping in the same bed, but avoiding intimacy that might complicate our arrangement. But desire has its own logic. Ellie, Valentina said one night, her voice soft in the darkness. Can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy with this arrangement? I turned to face her, our bodies inches apart on the king-sized mattress. Are you? I asked first. Yes, surprisingly, completely happy. Which scares me. Why does it scare you? Because this was supposed to be temporary. A solution to your parents' pressure, but it's starting to feel like something more. Valentina's hand found mine under the covers. What if it is something more? Then we're in trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble? I don't know yet. She moved closer, her breath warm against my cheek. Want to find out? This time when we kissed, there was nothing tentative about it. Months of careful boundaries dissolved as we gave in to the attraction we'd been fighting. Her hands traced patterns on my skin while I lost myself in the taste and scent of her. We made love with the desperation of people finally admitting the truth to themselves. Every touch felt like a confession. Every whispered endearment, like a promise we weren't sure we could keep. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that smelled like both of us. The magnitude of what we'd done settled over me. So much for keeping this simple, I murmured. Simple is overrated. Valentina traced lazy circles on my shoulder. Besides, when has anything about us ever been simple? She was right. From our first meeting at the pottery booth, we'd been careening towards something neither of us fully understood. What do we tell people? I asked about why we got married so quickly. The truth. That we fell in love and couldn't wait. Is that what happened? Isn't it? I considered the question seriously. Had we fallen in love or convinced ourselves we were in love to justify the impulsive marriage? The distinction mattered but felt impossible to untangle. I love you, I said finally. I'm just not sure when it started or where it's going. Does it matter? We're here now. It matters because your family will never accept this. Your racing sponsors might object to your sudden marriage to a woman. My colleagues are already asking uncomfortable questions. Valentina propped herself up on one elbow, studying my face in the dim light. Are you saying you want out? I'm saying we need to be realistic about what we're facing. And I'm saying some things are worth fighting for, even if the odds are against us. Her certainty was both admirable and frustrating. At 33, she still believed love could conquer practical obstacles. At 57, I knew better. But lying there with her warm body pressed against mine, her heart beating steadily under my palm, I wanted to believe it, too. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, what? Okay, let's fight for this. Whatever this is. Valentina's smile was radiant in the darkness. Whatever this is. She kissed me again, soft and sweet, and I let myself imagine a future where love really could be enough. Where two women from different worlds could build something lasting despite the odds stacked against them. Outside, rain continued falling on Durham, washing the city clean for whatever came next. Reality hit us 6 weeks into married life with the subtlety of a racing crash. I was cataloging Roman pottery when my supervisor, Dr. Elaine Porter, appeared at my office door with an expression I'd never seen before. Concerned, maybe disappointed. Eleanor, we need to talk. She closed the door behind her, which immediately put me on edge. Elaine and I had worked together for 15 years with mutual respect and minimal drama. Is there something you'd like to tell me about your recent personal changes? She asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. I'm not sure what you mean. Your marriage to a much younger woman? A professional race car driver who, according to several board members, represents everything our institution doesn't stand for. My stomach dropped. My personal life doesn't affect my work performance, doesn't it? You've been distracted for months, taking unexpected leave, arriving late, leaving early, and now this sudden marriage to someone the community sees as reckless and inappropriate. Valentina isn't reckless or inappropriate. She's intelligent, accomplished, and I love her. Elaine's expression softened slightly. Eleanor, I'm not questioning your feelings. I'm questioning your judgment. The museum board is concerned about our reputation. We depend on conservative donors who might not appreciate our senior archivist's lifestyle choices. The words hit like a physical blow. Are you threatening my job? I'm giving you a heads up. Some board members want you to choose between your marriage and your position here. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. 25 years of dedicated service reduced to a choice between love and livelihood. I need time to think. I managed. You have until the next board meeting. 2 weeks. That evening, I sat in our living room, staring out at the city lights, trying to process the impossible choice I'd been given. When Valentina arrived home from practice, she immediately sensed something was wrong. What happened? She asked, settling beside me on the couch. I told her everything. Elaine's veiled threats, the board's concerns, the ultimatum that felt like a noose tightening around my throat. Those bastards, Valentina said when I finished, they can't do this. Actually, they can. North Carolina is an at-will employment state. They don't need 'cause if they want me gone. So, we'll fight it. Get a lawyer. File discrimination charges. With what money? Legal battles take years and drain bank accounts. Besides, proving discrimination would require admitting our marriage started as a convenience rather than love. Valentina was quiet for several moments. Processing the implications. You're thinking about leaving me. I'm thinking about keeping my job, the pension I'll need to survive, the career I've built over decades. And what about us? What about what we've built together? The pain in her voice nearly broke my resolve. What have we built really? A few months of playing house while pretending a legal arrangement was something more. You don't mean that, don't I? Look at us, Valentina. We're from completely different worlds. You take risks for a living while I preserve the past. You're young and fearless while I'm middle-aged and practical. Maybe this was always doomed to fail. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. So, you're just giving up? Walking away because some narrow-minded board members disapprove? I'm being realistic about what we're facing. It's not just the museum. Your sponsors are pressuring you too, aren't they? Valentina's silence confirmed my suspicion. What did they say? I pressed. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. She turned from the window, her face a mask of controlled emotion. Henderson Motors is pulling their sponsorship. They don't want their brand associated with my lifestyle choices. 2 other sponsors are reconsidering their contracts. Damn it, Valentina. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was hoping we could weather it. That love would be enough to overcome the obstacles. And now I'm starting to think you were right. Maybe some things are too complicated to fix. We stared at each other across the room, the distance feeling impossible to bridge. All the intimacy we'd built seemed to evaporate in the face of external pressure. So, what are we saying here? I asked quietly. I don't know. I just know I can't ask you to sacrifice your career for something that might not survive anyway. And I can't ask you to risk your racing future for a relationship that started as a legal convenience. The words felt like surrender, though neither of us wanted to admit it. That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed, careful not to touch. The physical distance felt symbolic of everything pulling us apart. Over the next few days, we moved around each other like polite strangers. Valentina left early for practice. I stayed late at the museum. We ate dinner in silence, having exhausted our capacity for difficult conversations. It was sustainable in the way that slow poison is sustainable. The breaking point came during a quiet Sunday afternoon. We were reading in the living room, maintaining the pretense of domestic normalcy when Valentina suddenly closed her book. I can't do this anymore, she said. Do what? Pretend we're okay when we're both miserable. Pretend this marriage has a future when we're too scared to fight for it. I set down my magazine, meeting her eyes for the first time in days. What are you suggesting? That we stop pretending, except that sometimes love isn't enough to overcome everything else. The finality in her voice cut deep. Is that what you want? What I want is for you to choose me. Choose us. Fight for what we have instead of calculating the risks. And what I want is for you to understand that I can't throw away my entire life on a maybe. So, we're at an impasse. It seems like we are. Valentina stood up, running her hands through her hair in frustration. I love you, Eleanor, but I won't beg you to stay married to me. I'm not asking you to beg. No, you're asking me to accept that your fear is stronger than your love. The accusation stung because it contained truth I didn't want to acknowledge. Was I letting fear drive my decisions? Was I using practical concerns to avoid the terrifying vulnerability of choosing love over security? Maybe we rushed into this, I said quietly. Maybe we should have waited, gotten to know each other better before making it legal. Maybe. Or maybe we're just cowards when things get difficult. Neither of us wanted to continue the conversation, but neither wanted to leave it unfinished. We were stuck in the terrible space between holding on and letting go. I need some air, Valentina said finally. I'm going for a drive. After she left, I sat alone in our apartment, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Her racing magazines mixed with my historical journals, her leather jacket hanging beside my conservative blazers. Evidence of two people trying to merge incompatible worlds. Maybe she was right. Maybe we were cowards. But sometimes being a coward was just another word for being realistic about impossible odds. When she returned hours later, we made love with desperate intensity, as if physical connection could bridge the emotional distance growing between us. Afterward, lying in her arms, I wondered if this was how love died. Not with dramatic arguments, but with quiet capitulation to forces too strong to resist. I don't want to lose you, I whispered against her shoulder. Then don't let them win, she whispered back. But by morning, we both knew winning required more courage than either of us possessed. The decision came from an unexpected source. I was reorganizing medieval manuscripts when Mrs. Liang appeared at the museum entrance, moving slowly with her walker, but determined. The elderly potter, who'd unwittingly brought Valentina and me together, looked around the lobby with curious eyes. Mrs. Hart. The security guard pointed her toward my office. Mrs. Liang, what brings you here? She settled carefully into my visitor's chair, studying my face with the sharp intelligence I remembered from the festival. I heard about your troubles. The gossip reaches even old women like me. Heat flooded my cheeks. I'm not sure what you mean. The marriage, the pressure, the choice they're forcing you to make. Her accent was slight, but her words precise. I came to tell you a story. I wanted to protest that my personal life wasn't suitable for discussion, but something in her manner demanded attention. In 1943, I was 23, living in San Francisco's Chinatown. I loved a Japanese woman named Aiko, whose family had been taken to internment camps. The words hit like cold water. Mrs. Liang had never mentioned her personal history beyond pottery techniques. Society said, we were wrong on every level. Two women, different races, during wartime when loving the enemy could get you killed. But love doesn't ask permission from society. What happened? I chose safety. Married the Chinese man my parents selected. Had 4 children. Lived a respectable life. Mrs. Liang's eyes grew distant. Aiko survived the camps. Moved to Boston. Never married. I saw her once in 1987 at a pottery exhibition. She was still beautiful, still alone. Silence stretched between us as the implications settled. Do you regret your choice? Every day for 78 years. Safety is overrated when you trade your heart for it. After she left, I couldn't concentrate on work. Mrs. Liang's story echoed in my mind, a cautionary tale about prioritizing security over authentic love. That evening, I found Valentina in the garage working on her motorcycle with angry efficiency. She'd been spending more time there lately, avoiding our apartment and the tension that filled it. We need to talk, I said. About what? Our impending divorce? The word divorce hung in the air like a challenge. We hadn't used it before, though it lurked beneath every recent conversation about fighting back instead of giving up. Valentina looked up from the engine, surprise flickering across her face. What brought this on? I told her about Mrs. Liang's visit. The story of love sacrificed for societal approval. The regret that lasted a lifetime. I don't want to be her. I finished living with regret because I was too scared to fight for what mattered. What are you saying? I'm saying screw the museum board. Screw your sponsors. Screw anyone who thinks they can dictate who we love. Valentina set down her wrench, giving me her full attention. You could lose your job. Then I'll find another one. Museums exist in other cities. I have skills, references, a reputation built over decades, and I could lose my racing career. Then we'll build something new together. She stood slowly, wiping her hands on a rag. You mean that? I mean that loving you is worth more than keeping people comfortable with my choices. The smile that spread across her face was radiant. So, we fight. We fight. This time when she kissed me, it felt like a declaration of war against everyone trying to tear us apart. The next morning I phoned Elaine Porter and asked for a meeting with the full board. Are you sure? She cautioned. They're in no mood to be generous. I'm certain. The boardroom was ice cold when I walked in. 12 conservative faces, disappointment to outright disdain, tracked me to the head of the polished table. These were people who'd backed my career for decades. Now the warmth was gone. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, I understand you have concerns about my private life. Chairman Harold Bennett cleared his throat. Eleanor, we've always appreciated your work, but recent developments have created complications. By complications, you mean my marriage to another woman. We mean, he said, a union whose lifestyle conflicts with our institutional values. And which values are those exactly? I asked. Because mine include love, commitment, and building a life with someone who makes me better. Don't be naive, cut in Diane Mercer. This looks like a midlife crisis, marrying someone half your age and wholly inappropriate. Valentina is 33, not 16, I said evenly. She's accomplished, intelligent, and treats me with more respect than some people in this room. The temperature dropped further. Then came the ultimatum, dressed in corporate politeness, choose the museum or choose the marriage, not both. I choose my wife, I said clearly. And I choose to believe this institution is better than the small-minded bigotry you're displaying. Bennett's face went stiff. Your resignation will be accepted immediately. I'm not resigning. If you want me gone, fire me. Put the discrimination in writing so everyone can see what the Durham Museum of History stands for. I set my badge and keys on the table and walked out. 25 years of stability evaporated in 10 minutes, and still I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Valentina was waiting in the lot, nervy and expectant, leaning against her bike. How did it go? I'm unemployed as of today. She winced. I'm sorry. Don't be. They showed their true colors. Now I'm free to find a place that values competence over conformity. What do we do now? Now we go home and plan. Together. That night we made love like people who'd stared down their fears and chosen each other anyway. Every touch felt like a victory. Every whispered endearment, a promise we were finally brave enough to keep. No regrets? Valentina asked afterward. None. Only that it took us so long to find our courage. 3 days later, my phone rang. Dr. Ana Torres from the North Carolina Museum of Art in Greensboro. Heard about Durham, she said bluntly. Dinosaurs. Interested in leading our new historical preservation department. The offer, a sizable raise, better benefits, colleagues who cared about expertise, not personal lives. When do you want me? I asked. Next month, if you can swing it. Meanwhile, Valentina found new sponsors through organizations that actively supported diversity in racing. Progressive companies eager to associate their brands with authentic representation rather than hiding from it. Looks like taking a stand paid off, she said, showing me contracts worth more than her previous deals. Sometimes doing the right thing is also the smart thing. Sometimes the universe rewards people brave enough to fight for love. We spent that evening on our apartment balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below and planning our move to Greensboro. A new city, new careers, new opportunities to build something that belonged entirely to us. Think we'll make it? Valentina asked, her hand finding mine in the darkness. I think we already have. 6 months later, Greensboro welcomed us with open arms and fresh possibilities. The North Carolina Museum of Art felt like coming home after exile. My colleagues appreciated expertise over gossip, and Dr. Torres proved to be everything the Durham board wasn't. Progressive, supportive, genuinely interested in building something meaningful together. Your medieval textile analysis is groundbreaking, she told me during my 3rd week. We're getting requests from universities across the country. Meanwhile, Valentina's racing career reached new heights with sponsors who celebrated her authenticity rather than hiding from it. Rainbow Racing Collective featured her prominently in their diversity campaigns, and her performance on the track silenced remaining critics. Check this out, she said one evening, showing me a magazine cover featuring her in full racing gear beside the headline breaking barriers at 200 miles per hour. My wife, the famous race car driver. Your wife, who still can't believe she landed someone as brilliant as you. We'd settled into domestic rhythms that felt earned rather than accidental. Morning coffee together before separate careers. Evening debriefs about our days. Weekend explorations of our new city. Simple pleasures that felt profound after fighting so hard to protect them. The real test came when I least expected it. I was cataloging Renaissance paintings when my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Eleanor, it's Elena Cruz. Valentina's mother. We hadn't spoken since that disastrous dinner in Durham. Mrs. Cruz, I'm calling to apologize and to ask if you might consider giving us another chance. The request caught me completely off guard. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean that watching my daughter succeed while being true to herself has taught me something about love, about what really matters. She explained that Valentina's racing achievements had made local news in Fort Lauderdale, forcing the family to confront their prejudices. Seeing their daughter thrive rather than suffer had gradually shifted their perspective. She's happier than I've ever seen her, Elena continued. And the interview she gives about you, about your marriage, they're beautiful. She loves you completely. I love her completely, too. I know. That's why I'm calling. Javier and I would like to visit if you'd be willing to meet us again as family this time. That evening, I told Valentina about her mother's call. She listened with growing amazement, then burst into tears. They want to try. They want to try. What did you tell her? That I'd discuss it with my wife and get back to them. Valentina pulled me into her arms, spinning us both around our living room with giddy joy. This is really happening. We're really making this work. The visit 2 weeks later went better than anyone expected. Valentina's parents arrived with cautious smiles and genuine attempts at acceptance. Elena brought homemade empanadas. Javier talked racing statistics with surprising knowledge. I researched your career extensively, he admitted to me over dinner. Your reputation in the academic world is impressive. Thank you. I also researched what it means to be gay. I realize I had many misconceptions. The conversation was awkward but sincere. Two people trying to bridge a gap they'd helped create. By the end of the weekend, we'd established the foundation for real relationship. Not perfect, not without ongoing challenges, but authentic in ways our original meeting never was. They're trying, Valentina said after they left. We all are. Spring arrived with an invitation that changed everything. Triad Pride Festival organizers asked us to be grand marshals, recognizing our visibility as a married couple who'd overcome discrimination to build successful careers. It feels surreal, I told Valentina as we prepared for the parade. 6 months ago, we were hiding from public scrutiny. And now we're celebrating in front of thousands. The parade route stretched through downtown Greensboro, lined with cheering crowds, waving rainbow flags, and holding signs of support. We rode in a convertible, waving and smiling at people whose acceptance felt hard-won and precious. This is what courage looks like, Valentina shouted over the crowd noise. This is what love looks like when you stop being afraid of it. At the festival, they asked us to speak about our journey. Standing at the podium, looking out at faces reflecting every age, race, and background imaginable, I felt the responsibility of representation. Love doesn't ask permission, I began, echoing Mrs. Liang's wisdom. It doesn't check social calendars or calculate financial risks. Love simply asks us to be brave enough to choose it. I talked about fear, about the price of authenticity, about learning that safety without love is just another kind of prison. But mostly I concluded love asks us to trust that being true to ourselves is worth whatever challenges we face. The applause was thunderous, but it was Valentina's smile that mattered most. That night, we renewed our vows in a ceremony that bore no resemblance to our hasty courthouse wedding.